using an 8mm socket, or you can use a flathead screwdriver. You want to go ahead and start disconnecting the clamps and hoses to remove the intake unit here. So we'll start by loosening these. Then the engine cover, just kind of pop that up. And you want to go ahead and get to this hose clamp right here and loosen that. Now using a 10mm socket, we want to go ahead and remove this bolt right here. And take that bolt out and set that aside. We're going to go ahead and pull the intake tube off of the airbox here. That's loose. I'm going to go ahead and pull up on this. I'm going to go ahead and lift up. Separate this unit. Well, underneath you want to go ahead and pinch this little tab right here. Pull that off and set this aside. Okay, now go ahead and pull up on the engine cover and put that aside. I'm going to reach over here, press down on the tab, and pull that connector off. Set that aside. Next, what we're going to want to try and do is remove these two bolts from the EGR tube. We're going to try and do that by using a 8mm socket on each one of those bolt heads there. Okay, once that bolt starts to come out, you want to be careful not to drop that down. Get that, and then you have the gasket, and slide that out. Just grab the EGR tube. You can gently wiggle that out and remove that from the intake. Now what we're going to want to do is go ahead and access these two 10mm bolts on the engine itself. So what we're going to do is we can locate this one down below right here on the right hand side. The other one is down underneath that we're going to want to use a wrench to get to. Once you get it to a certain point, you should be able to go ahead and reach on down there and unthread it the rest of the way. Using a 10mm ratchet wrench, we're able to get it in right behind the alternator and get to that 10mm bolt. Loosen that up. You can only take the bolt out so far using the ratchet wrench because the bolt comes out and limits your space to remove the wrench before it hits the backside of the alternator. So you want to go ahead and once you get that bolt to a certain point, you have to reach down and use your fingertips to loosen that bolt the rest of the way. Alright, go ahead and pull that bolt out, and you can go ahead and pull the gasket while you're there. So you can use a little piece of Scotch-Brite or some fine sandpaper. We're just going to kind of clean off that surface. You don't want to score it up or anything, you just want to clean any kind of corrosion or debris off of that. And just wipe it down. We want a nice tight seal from when we put that EGR back on. All right, we're going to go ahead and reuse the factory bolts and put these in. In some cases you may have to loosen the alternator, but in our case here, it looks like it's going to work out just fine to go ahead and fit the EGR back in. So we just thread the bolts back in through the gasket, and then we'll go ahead and line this up and try and get these bolts started by hand. Go ahead and snug up this bolt here, and we're going to use a wrench on the bottom one. Go ahead and snug this. I'm going to go back to the upper bolt and just snug that down one last time. Alright, so now you're going to want to go ahead and insert this into the intake. Get that lined up. And before we push that in, we're now going to go ahead and try and start lining up the bolts. Putting one of the bolts through the flange, like so. And then we want to get that gasket put on. So line the gasket up, push the bolt through, and spin that around, and get this lined up so we can get that threaded into the EGR and just try and get that bolt caught a couple threads. You want to go ahead and get that back bolt installed. Probably have to work your way around in here somehow. Work that gasket up, push that flange up. All right, and I'm going to use a finger on one side and a finger on the top and thread that in. I'm going to go ahead and try and thread these in as far as I can. I'm going to go ahead and bottom both of these bolts out. All right, now that both of these bolts are bottomed out and snugged down, you're going to want to come back up to the top, to the EGR tube, and push this in to the intake the rest of the way. Now I want to go ahead and connect the EGR connector, press it in, make sure it's clicked in. All right, well, installing the airbox here, there's a metal post right here that's going to insert into the bottom part here, and then we also have a connector to go to one of the intake temp sensors right here. So I want to go ahead and get this connected. We'll line up that connector, snap that on, and then we're going to go ahead and try lining up the bottom. While you're doing this, we also want to pay attention to the portion here, to the airbox and the filter. So you have three different things that you're trying to do to get lined up. Sometimes I just run a pick on the inside here just to get these little nubs around and get that popped on. Now you have your 10mm bolt that goes in the back side right here. I want to get that started by hand. Snug that down. Using your 8mm, we're going to go ahead and tighten up the hose clamp here. I'm going to go ahead and snug up the two of these. And take the engine cover, slide that back in underneath. Line that up and press it down on top of the mounting studs.